concrete walls. There's a place for us where we could go, where we could be alone. Between city lights, we don't have to hide. I wanna go, do you wanna follow? There's something in the air, I can't explain it, but it's there. Ain't nobody gonna find us in our secret love affair. I don't wanna have to hide no more, it shouldn't be unfair. I wanna go, and I wanna know, do you wanna follow? Baby, do you wanna follow? Come with me, do you wanna follow? Baby, can't you see that? I wanna go, and I wanna know, do you wanna follow? Baby, do you wanna follow? Come with me, do you wanna follow? Baby, can't you see that? I wanna go, and I wanna know, do you wanna follow? I can't understand why we can't hold hands, but they don't know what we have is real love. Aren't you sick and tired of having to hide? I know a place, do you wanna follow? There's something in the air, I can't explain it, but it's there. Ain't nobody gonna find us in our secret love affair. I don't wanna have to hide no more, it shouldn't be unfair. I wanna go, and I wanna know, do you wanna follow? Baby, do you wanna follow? Come with me, do you wanna follow? Baby, can't you see that? I wanna go, and I wanna know, do you wanna follow? Do you wanna follow? Baby, do you wanna follow? Come with me, do you wanna follow? Baby, can't you see that? I wanna go, and I wanna know, do you wanna follow?
What's up, everybody? Welcome to Livestream. Happy Sunday to you. It's a happy Sunday here. I just got done making zucchini bread. Well, zucchini, little mini muffins, actually. Because, an hour ago, we were cleaning out the fridge. And there was some zucchini in there that, like, zucchini's kind of, you buy the zucchini and you're like, I'm going to eat some zucchini this week. You're going to fry it up, whatever. You're going to make some yummy zucchini. And then, like, maybe you make, like, one zucchini. You're not going to eat all that zucchini, let's face it. But don't throw it out. Shred it up and put it through a processor, a ricer, whatever, just grate it. Make some zucchini bread. It's amazing. And I feel good because I didn't throw that zucchini out. And now I have some delicious zucchini bread. And I feel like that, I'm a good person. You could do it with zucchini. It's just like banana bread. It's basically the same recipe as banana bread. You could do it with yellow squash. Okay, once upon a time when I was gardening, I had so much squash because, well, if you've gardened, you know. And I was like, what am I going to do with all this squash? And I made basically yellow squash bread out of it. It was delicious. It was delicious. So, that's what I did with my morning. And that's also why my live stream was slightly late. Because I had literally I pulled them out of the oven with about 10 minutes to spare. And then I tasted one and I was like, oh, these are good. And then I spent like 5 minutes just standing over the tray of little mini muffins, just going, oh, okay, I got to go downstairs now. Oh, I got to go downstairs now. And, that's where we're at. What did you do this morning? Oh, wait, we're here to talk about FPV. We're here to talk about FPV. Right, my bad. Oh. Are you telling me I could make bread out of leftover pumpkin from the festivities? Cool Cat, I would give it a try. I would give it a try, Cool Cat. I mean, I've successfully, banana bread is just a generic, quick bread, right? And the banana provides sweetness, it provides a flavor, the banana flavor, of course, and it provides a little bit of moisture, right? So, if you're going with something like a zucchini or a squash, it's going to have a little more moisture probably than banana. I mean, I could be wrong. And maybe it just releases the moisture more. When you shred the zucchini, there's just little bits of zucchini juice down in the bottom of the bowl. So it might throw your recipe off just a little bit, but I've subbed zucchini into banana bread recipes. I've subbed, I'd try pumpkin. I'd give it a try. Pumpkin seems a little drier. I don't know. I could be wrong. Shred it up. Throw it in. Yeah, do it. Okay. What are we going to talk about this week? We're going to talk about the O3 air unit. Is that just what we're going to talk about for the whole stream? Is that it? Is that okay? Live stream over. No. We're not going to do that. We're going to take your questions. I'm going to take your questions here in the chat. Oh, Alan Shearing, coffee wake up time in New Zealand. I'm on a coffee. I'm not going to give it a fancy name like a coffee cleanse or a detox, but I am currently. It's like day 6 with no caffeine. So don't tell me about your coffee in the morning. Every so often you got to hit the reset button. So, I'm going to be taking your questions and reading your comments right here in the YouTube chat. I am also going to be taking questions from these beautiful people, the most beautiful people in all of FPV. And the reason that I say that about them is because they pay me money. So, some might think it's insincere, but I don't. And I hope you believe me. These folks over here on the Discord server are my patrons. Thank you guys for your support. And I will be reading your questions and giving you special extra attention. Yeah. Oh, okay. That's not. Alrighty. Alright, that's a little creepy. We got a new Wednesday Addams movie coming out. We're going to have some new Wednesday GIF. And if you want me to make sure I read your comment, hit the $ down here. Leave a super chat. I will be reading those a little later in the stream. We have 1 super chat already. We'll be getting to those. But I always like to start. What happened to Forrest Gump? Whose face is that? Who is that? Is that Willem Dafoe? I'm guessing Willem Dafoe. Who is that, Rockcrawler? That's not Forrest Gump. That's for damn sure. Tell me, Rockcrawler. I must know. It is Willem Dafoe. Yes. I am not face blind. Do one with me. Do one with my face. Okay, get back to me. I always like to start out by taking some questions from the chat, though, before I turn to the filthy lucre, the people who pay me money. So let's take some questions from the chat. Does JB smoke weed, though? No, I don't. I don't have anything against it. It's just not my jam. I'll drink a nice bourbon, But pot has just never been my thing. I feel like I'm missing out in a lot of ways, to be honest with you. But there you go. What drone would you recommend to me as a beginner on a budget? This lulba. Drone for a beginner on a budget. The cheapest way to get into FPV with an all-in-one kit is something like the Emax Easy Pilot Pro, the Beta FPV Cetus, one of those little like 85 millimeter size drones that comes with a cheap set of goggles, a cheap controller, a couple batteries, and a charger. And it's literally everything you need to get into the air. You take it out of the box, you charge the battery, you plug it in, and you go. That's the promise anyway. And it costs about $250. That's where I would say you can start. If you want like all of everything. Hey, Phantom FPV, good to see you. Will I be able to rip balls with the new DJI O3 in 1080p? That's an interesting question, Phantom. Will you be able to rip balls? So, Phantom, first of all, I think it's a given that no matter what you're flying, you're going to be ripping balls. Ripping balls is always more about the pilot than it is the equipment. I think we can all, if you don't know that, you should know that. Buying Mr. Steele's quad won't make you fly like Mr. Steele. Buying Phantom FPV's quad won't make you fly like Phantom FPV. Buying Eddie Van Halen's guitar won't make you play like Eddie Van Halen, you know? There's a story, it's probably an apocryphal story, maybe it's a true story, of a famous guitarist, you know, walks into a guitar store, picks up a guitar, and doesn't matter what guitar he picks up. It just sounds like him because of who he is in his mind and his hands and his body, his muscles, his fingers, etc. And that's true of FPV pilots too, okay? You'll be able to rip no matter what you're flying. But obviously some things are more conducive to ripping than others. Like, for example, I think there's a fascinating question about the latency of the O3 Air unit. The latency of the O3 Air unit in 1080p mode with the goggles too is a little bit higher than the latency of the V2 goggles in 810p. And some people attribute that to the additional processing of the H.265 streamers or whatever. The power output of the O3 Air unit, the FCC paperwork says that the power output of the O3 Air unit can go up to 2 watts. Now, as far as I know, it's very difficult to validate that on the bench. But if it goes up to 2 watts, that could start to explain why some people are seeing better range and penetration out of the O3 Air unit than out of the Vista. Somebody made a point that if the O3 Air unit has additional output power, which I want to be very clear, no one has validated this. We're just reading the FCC paperwork that says it can do that, not that it does do that. But if the O3 Air unit has additional output power, then theoretically it could have lower latency than the Vista under many real-world conditions. Like, think about how the Vista works. When you're sitting right at your feet, you have whatever, 21, 24 milliseconds latency. You take off, you go fly away, and pretty quickly you're up in the 30s. Right? Pretty quickly. Well, if you had a higher powered O3, maybe it would hold that, it would start out maybe around 30. But then it would hold that 30 longer. Huh? I don't know. So, Phantom, I think you're going to be able to rip. I think that there's a lot of people. I'll be very curious to see if people, hardcore freestyle pilots, decide to give up a GoPro and just use the O3 and save themselves between, let's say, 50 to 135 grams of weight by not carrying a separate GoPro. That's a lot of weight, and it makes your quad fly way better. And I think some people are going to make that decision. Yeah, good question. I know he was asking it in a tongue-in-cheek manner, Mike Bergman, but I can't help but take questions seriously. Let's see here. Scrolling back, any good 5-inch toothpick frames that are open source that I could cut myself? Hailstor, that's a tall ask. Open source toothpick frames. The only open source free FPV frames that come to my mind are the Source One line. I don't think Source One has a toothpick frame though, and I don't know of any others. So that's going to be a no for me. Let's talk about power consumption. Bad for Life is talking about power consumption. And in fact, this is we'll call this a super chat. FPV Trends says, can you talk a little bit about the power consumption of the O3 air unit? So I want to show you guys, because the question is, if you have an O3 air unit, is that going to work with the 9-volt BEC? Is that going to work with the 9-volt BEC on many flight controllers? I want to show you guys this. Wait, I don't want this guy's email address to be in here just in case. That seems rude. Let me just take a screen grab here real quick. Okay, so I have been in contact with an engineer and a marketing guy over at DJI because I got included in this release, yay. And what he told me was that the maximum power draw of the O3 air unit is up to 12 watts. In general, 6 to 10 watts. Okay? So, if that's true, then 12 watts divided by 9 volts is 1.3 amps. Well, that's fine. That's fine. 1.3 amps. If that's true, then it is completely a non-issue. Any typical, most of the flight controllers I see that are made for the DJI Air unit do something like 15 watts, 18, maybe 20 watts. They'll do something like 2 amps at 9 volts. Then if that's the case, there's no issue. So I can also say that iFlight is shipping Bind and Flies with a 2 amp rated regulator. They say internally that the regulator is good up to 3 amps, but they only advertise it at 2 amps, and it's working. So I don't think the power consumption test is a big deal. Brandon Beans, bear in mind when talking about Chris Rosser's tests of the latency of the O3 air unit, that he was testing, was he testing at 100 frames per second? Yes, okay. So 40 milliseconds for 100 frames per second, you definitely want to be running 100 frames per second. You do not want to be running at 50 or 60 frames per second if you're doing freestyle. That'll get you the lowest possible latency. Nin Mario wants to know, is the QAV-S frame going to be updated for the O3 camera? Yes, it is. Definitely. Let's get another couple What happened to my... Why were we on the news? That's weird. I must have hit the wrong button. Sorry about that, guys. Can you recommend a decent beginner 3D printer for under $300? Asks, you are a barbarian. The two that I would recommend are the Ender 3 and the Sovol SV01. I have both of them. They're both good in their own way. The Sovol beats the Ender a little bit in terms of specs, but the Ender is more widely supported and documented. Has more, there's more tutorials and instructions and accessories and upgrades for the Ender. Either one of them, I think, is a solid choice. So... Ghost Branch has a hot take about the testing of the O3 air unit. Ghost Branch's opinion is that the O3 system is aimed at replacing your action camera, so the default settings of the camera are set to a higher contrast, lower dynamic range, because that's what action camera people want. But FPV pilots want more dynamic range, more shadow detail, and less contrast. His argument is that FPV pilots should be testing and flying the O3 air unit in the cine profile, the flat color profile. Ghost Branch, I agree with you that the much larger sensor of the O3 should have better dynamic range than the smaller sensor on the original DJI camera. I did have a little bit of cine profile in my review, and you could check that out. But I didn't do a detailed sort of dive on whether the dynamic range was better. It starts, is the SVO6 really coming in at $300? That's a good upgrade. If it comes in under 300, I didn't think it came in under 300. Continuing with the super chats, Chad Adams, thank you for a $10 super chat. Suggestions for a sub 250-gram quad with the O3 and TBS Nano. I don't know if anybody is making, like, the GEP-RC Smart 3.5. Is it coming with the O3 air unit? I don't think it is. I don't think GEP-RC has updated that yet. I'm not aware of a sub 250-gram, like a 3-inch, with the O3 air unit yet. Took, yes, Took asks, is the O3 air unit OSD working with the V2 goggles? Yes, it is, Took. Does anybody know of a sub 250-gram quad with the O3 air unit in it? A bind and fly. Stuart D89 says that you should take the camera out of auto mode and put it into manual mode. Well, the problem with that, Stuart, is when you lock exposure, you tend to get overexposure or underexposure sometimes. That's the risk. For FPV, auto exposure will help you make sure that you can always see where you're going. But obviously, for cinematic results, you would want to lock exposure. Oh, that's a great choice. That's a great point, Tim Z. Thank you for suggesting that. Flywoo has the Explorer LR4 available with the O3 air unit. Where's the listing? No, I don't see the listing. Have they announced it yet? Have they announced it? Oh, here it is. Yes, this is a great one. Chad Adams. So this is not a freestyle basher, but it is a sub 250-gram quad with the O3 air unit. Stuart says you should lock the shutter speed, but leave the ISO at normal. That's what I do with my GoPros. Amit Pai, thank you for 1,000 rupees. I've just bought a used OG DJI FPV drone, the V2 goggles, a remote too, and ordered a new O3 air unit. Should I have to activate it? You usually, if that stuff is new, yes, you have to activate all of it. Should I go for WTFOS? Completely confused as to how to set up. I mean, WTFOS only applies if you're using like the Caddx Vista or the other of that generation of video transmitter. WTFOS does not apply if you're using the FPV drone or the O3 air unit. So since you didn't say you were buying any Vistas or air units or anything like that, then WTFOS doesn't matter for you. As far as the drone, do you want to do drone hacks? That depends. I mean, whether you need to unlock something that it doesn't let you do. I think you're overthinking it. Just go through the steps, activate it, etc., and use it. MacTac, thank you for 10 Canadian dollars. I do a ton of long distance and use the V2 goggles with some True RC antennas. I'm curious if you can speak a bit about the idea of using the new O3 for long distance. Well, MacTac, I mean, you might want aftermarket antennas. The top two antennas are removable, and surely people will make aftermarket antennas for the goggles. We don't know if there is a hard distance limit on the new system. Nobody's run it out to that 13-kilometer limit that exists for the V2 system. So if there is a limit, we don't know what it is. I would hope that there wouldn't be. That is a little bit of an unknown, though. Right now, I don't know of anybody making like high-gain aftermarket antennas for the goggles 2. So at this point... Oh, but you don't have the goggles 2. You have the V2 goggles. Oh, well, go for it. You tell us. You tell us how far you can get the system. Mike Curran, thank you for a $10 super chat. Did Pyrodrone make a mistake? I bought the goggles 2 Friday for $569. Just wondering if you heard about that price. Thank you for all you do. I think that price is right for the United States. I think it's like 800 euros in Europe, but $569. I mean, I'm sure they didn't make a mistake on the pricing. Deuce FPV, thanks for a $10 super chat. How does a receiver convert a radio wave to electrical signal and send it to the flight controller? There's a principle in physics that a electrical current moving in a wire induces an electromagnetic field in space around the wire. Okay? So when you have an AC current sort of vibrating in a wire, the electromagnetic field around that wire, it radiates out into that electromagnetic field. That principle has a corollary that the opposite happens. When there is an electromagnetic field moving in the space around a wire, a current is induced in that wire. Okay? And so this is how antennas transmit and receive. On the transmit side, an electrical signal is induced in the wire, current flows in the wire back and forth at a certain frequency, and that is translated into an electromagnetic field that radiates out from the wire through space. That electromagnetic field is vibrating and moving in the same way that the electric current in the wire is, so that any information that is encoded by the electrical signal is also carried in the radio signal. When that electromagnetic field impinges upon, when it reaches another wire, which is the receiver antenna, it induces electrical current in that wire in the same pattern, and then that is decoded by the receiver and turned into sort of ones and zeros that are sent to the flight controller. I mean, there's a lot of detail left out from that. But we got an explanation here from Derek Brown from Jason Aviator. Thank you, Jason Aviator. Jason Aviator says, oh, well, you guys can't read it. It's too small. Jason Aviator says, here, let's do it this way. Oh, there we go. The pricing, the question is because Pyrodrone's $569 retail price is less than the $649 that DJI is asking. He says DJI knows they're the only place pilots can get the goggles right now because DJI will not ship to retailers until they have sold a preset amount directly to consumers. That's kind of shitty. DJI has not told us yet if our cost will change as a result of the markup. So the goggles were originally going to be $569. DJI marked them up to $649, and Pyro is saying that they will honor the $569 pre-order price unless the dealer cost goes above $569. In other words, Pyro seems like they are willing to sell these goggles not at a loss, but at no profit if DJI's price hike would cause customers to have to pay extra. Sheesh. That's a real Chad move. Thank you for the explanation, Jason Aviator. People are asking about this Chris Rosser video. What did Chris... I didn't see it. What is this Chris Rosser video about the O3? Is this the right Chris Rosser? There's another Chris Rosser out there. Yes, this is the correct Chris Rosser. What did Chris Rosser say about the O3? What are you guys asking about? This was just something to do with power consumption? Like 3 people have come into the chat and said, hey, has Bardwell talked about Chris Rosser's video yet? But all they see is new frames. I don't see like some showstopper deep dive. The DJI O3 is here. What information in that video is specifically interesting? I did watch, you can see I watched a lot of this video. Latency numbers, was it the power consumption? No? About latency. Oh, well, we kind of talked about the latency. Only thing that's changed about this, was it Mads Tech? Okay, we'll look at him. The only thing that's changed about Chris Rosser's latency information since he released it is that there is now a 4K 100 and 4K 120, which there wasn't at the time that he tested. Did Mads Tech say something? Can your Beck handle it? This could catch you out. Well, let's see. Mads Tech. How much power did he say it draws? DJI says it pulls up to 12 watts. Wait a second. Why are we... Oh.
We've then got a multimeter measuring the actual current draw as well. Whilst we can see it here, this gives us more digits and this will give us a better idea of what's going on. And then I've got a fan here blowing air over the air unit full chat. So what we're going to do is set it to 4K 100 frames a second, rock steady turned on, and then I'm going to turn low power mode off, absolute max. The goggles I'm going to turn, see, the current draw is increased to 1.17 amps, maybe 1.2 amps.
Yes.
We're at full RF output, but
That's at 8 volts, so that's consistent with what DJI said.
this...
Now, one thing, and I don't know if Ian addresses this, but if the unit has dynamic power, then it may not be at full power during bench tests like this. I don't know, and I'm not sure. I think it would be difficult to tell. But I always worry that it's at some, like, not at full power because it can tell the goggles are close by, and if you were to go further away, the power would jump up.
This point we're not recording. If I move the camera around a little bit, the image stabilization really isn't having an effect because it isn't recording. If I now swipe down, start recording on the goggles, you can now see that the current draw has increased.
Again, very consistent with what DJI said, about 12 watts. 12 divided by 8 volts is 1.5 amps. This is dead on with what DJI told me, so that's good.
If I start moving the camera around as well, you will see this get as high as 1.5, 1.6 amps. Now,
well,
in my testing,
close.
I have seen a current draw in excess of 12 watts on this system, or about 1.6 amps at 8 volt. So you're going to need to make sure whatever flight controller you're using.
Okay. I think this, so first of all, this is great research. Great research. It's always good to not take manufacturers' statements at face value and to validate them with bench testing. And kudos to Ian for doing this testing. This seems consistent with what DJI told me of about 11 to 12 watts. He's seeing slightly higher than 12 watts, but he didn't say much higher. And I think that, again, it's not going to be an issue for most people with a flight controller that's designed for use with the DJI V2 system. Most of those are rated for 18 or 20 watts. And so this is the original system pulled up to 10 watts, I believe. If you were at 1200 milliwatts, it pulled around 10 watts. So now we're pulling closer to 12 or 13 watts. I still think should not be close to the limit if the voltage regulator is honestly spec'd. Some people are asking about firmware updates for this system. This is confusing as shit. So there are two versions. There are two versions of DJI Assistant. One is the consumer drones version and one is the FPV version. Now here's the stupid thing. When you first have your V2, and by the way, if you have the goggles 2 and the O3 Air unit, you just use the consumer drones version. Fine. If you have your V2 goggles, you have to put them into the DJI FPV drone mode, then use Assistant 2 to update the firmware, and then it will be on a version of the firmware that now you will use the consumer drones program. Pretty weird. Pretty weird. It's confusing. Tom Zaboril in the Discord. Thank you for being a patron, Tom. Appreciate your support. Do I have to pull out the extra cables from the shipped O3 camera connector when using Crossfire on the build, or can I keep the DJI radio wires in the connector and plug that in? Tom, you do not have to remove those cables as long as you have your Crossfire receiver on a different UART than the plug that your flight controller uses. So in the DJI plug on your flight controller, there is going to be a TX and an RX. Let's say it's TX1 and RX1. That's used for the MSP connection. Don't worry about that. There will be another RX that is used for the S-Bus connection, and that'll be a different UART number. So let's say that's RX2, okay? Now let's say somewhere else on your flight controller you've got a TX2 and an RX2, and you solder your Crossfire receiver to those pads. Now you will have to remove that S-Bus wire from the plug because the air unit is on UART2 and the Crossfire receiver is on UART2, and they may have a conflict. But let's say your flight controller is set up so you in the DJI plug, you've got TX1 and RX1, that's for the MSP connection. You've got RX2 for the S-Bus wire, and then somewhere else on the flight controller, you've got TX3 and RX3, and you've used that for your Crossfire receiver. Now you only have one thing on each UART, and you're good to go. You do not need to remove the extra wires. Oh, Golden FPV with the real tough question. Oh, shit. Do you really have to rebind all your Vistas after running the O3 Air unit? Do you remember this bug, folks? Do you remember the bug where if you had the DJI potato drone, the FPV drone, I don't know why everyone calls it the potato. I like it, though. If you had the DJI FPV drone potato and you have Caddx Vistas and DJI Air units, when you switch the goggles from one to the other, all of your binds are lost. So when you switch back, you have to rebind your air units. Actually, according to MadsTech, you don't have to rebind all of them. You just have to rebind one, and then they all come back. So I guess that's better than the alternative. That bug still exists. It still exists. I just verified this yesterday, actually. And I checked with MadsTech, and he was like, yep, I also just verified it. So, if you have a mixture of O3 Air units and Vistas, and you're switching the goggles back and forth to switch between them, each time you do it, your binds are forgotten. And you have to rebind. I guess you just have to rebind one of those quads and then it comes back, but it's effing stupid. It's effing stupid. DJI, how did this not get fixed? It's effing stupid and it needs to be fixed. So dumb. Kraken Sport MX. Kraken Sport MX says, Thank you for 125 pesos. I'm new to the hobby. I've got the V1 goggles, a Pavo 2.5, and the Tango 2. I regret a few of my recent purchases since I'm moving to the V2 goggles and the O3. Should I move to the DJI remote? Kraken, I personally... So, the advantage of the DJI remote is the simplicity. You don't need a separate receiver on your build, and it's relatively easy to bind, and it has basically no setup. It's just sort of ready to go. The disadvantage is that now that we've got the O3 system, there are some compatibility quirks. The gray remote that came with the DJI FPV drone works with the O3 air unit, the Avata, the DJI FPV drone, but it does not work with the older Vista generation video transmitters, the Caddx Vista, the DJI air unit, the original. What are we going to call it now? Should we call it the O2 air unit? What are we going to call them? We need a term for it. It's stupid. There's the black remote that works with the Vistas, but we don't know whether it will ever work with the O3. DJI has said they're going to give backwards compatibility in the goggles so that the goggles 2 will be able to bind to the Vista generation of video transmitters. But we don't know whether they're also going to have backwards compatibility for the controller. So if you have a mixture of O3 Air Unit and Caddx Vista generation VTXs, at this time, you need 2 separate controllers, the black one and the gray one, which is kind of dumb. And we don't know if DJI is going to fix that. If they don't fix that, then that will continue to be a problem. And that's an incentive to use a third-party controller like the Tango, because at least you can use the same controller for all your quads. If you only have O3, Avata, DJI FPV drone, and you never plan on getting the Vista generation of video transmitters, because you just have all the money in the world, I guess, then the gray controller can do it all for you, and it will be simpler to set up. But you can do more with something like the Tango. Can we control Vista and O3 with the TX16S? Asked Mohammed Shokar. No, the TX16S cannot bind to any of them. You would put a separate receiver in your quad, and that receiver can be whatever you want it to be. Thank you, Coelho FPV, for a $5 super chat. Coelho says, not enough room to type my question. Please see GV Pilot in the Discord. Okay. GV Pilot says, has anyone successfully installed the new Reaper VTX without noise issues? I installed 2 Reaper units with noise problems that were fixed by swapping in a Solo. Wow. Well, I mean, the science certainly speaks for itself there. If you had 2 Reapers that had noise issues, and then bam, you swapped in a Solo and it was fine, then that certainly points to the VTXs. I didn't have noise problems with mine, but I can't say as I did extensive testing in flight with it. So that's just a sample size of 1, and probably not even that. Anybody using the Reaper? I mean, somebody out there surely is having the Reaper and not having any issues with noise. Peter Schmidt wants to know, is it possible to control a stepper motor driver with some kind of receiver that could be connected to a radio like the TX16S? I don't know what kind of input a stepper motor takes, but surely there are stepper motors that are controlled by a PWM input, right? I've worked with servos, but to tell you the truth, I haven't really worked with stepper motors in like a hobby context. On 3D printers, the stepper motors are digitally controlled via a serial interface. Can anybody tell me if there are stepper motor drivers that can be driven by a PWM output from a receiver? Surely the answer is yes, right? Yep, you've got the stepper motor driver, and the driver takes an input from something and converts that into commands to move the stepper motor one way or the other. Is that like a standard type of driver that you can just buy off the shelf? Like, can I just search for like stepper motor driver PWM input? Well, see, that's the thing. A stepper motor, is it position based? Yeah, this is a tricky one. Would the input basically just be like above 1500 move the motor one way, below 1500 move the motor the other way, and kind of turn it just into a, like, yeah. You know, this guy seems to be asking this exact question. It seems like this is the kind of thing that you would be writing code in an Arduino or a Raspberry Pi. Instead, to interpret the PWM signal into a command for how you want the stepper motor to move. It sounds like the answer is no. The real question is, what are you wanting the stepper motor to do, Peter Schmidt? What do you want the stepper motor to do? Because a lot of times when somebody's using a servo, we want it to go to a certain position, right? With a stepper motor, you're just moving in tiny increments, and it doesn't really correlate to a PWM input. Wesley wants to see some blind latency tests. Yep. Wesley, I can tell you what the outcome would be. The outcome of any latency test is that unless you're and I'm sure of this, I would really put a lot of reputation behind this, but probably not any actual money. Maybe. My guess is that with a difference of, say, 20 to 30 milliseconds, I think that unless you're really in a controlled environment like a race course, I don't think you're going to notice the difference. And I don't think people could reliably tell the difference. It doesn't mean that there's no effect, though. Just because I can't consciously say one is different doesn't mean that there aren't sort of subconscious things happening and that it doesn't matter. Does the full Betaflight OSD work with the V2 goggles and the O3 air unit? Yes. Yep, can confirm. It didn't work for me on the firmware, but on the release day firmware, it is working for me. Is the O3 air unit made in the USA? Ha ha. Ha 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 ha. Ha 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 ha. Are you joking? No. No, it's not made in the USA. No. Oh my goodness. GMI Visuals says, I fly HD0 back-to-back with the Cobra X and the Scout HD. I can definitely feel a difference in latency. Jason, unfortunately, there's no way for you to blind test that because you can just feel what goggles you're wearing on your face. So we'll have to take your word for it. I will say, though, either the latency is more than 20 or 30 milliseconds in that, like, once you get into the 50 millisecond range, I start to believe that you could reliably feel it under, like, just average flight conditions. And somewhere below the 20 or 30 millisecond range, I'm skeptical that almost anybody could actually feel it, except under very controlled conditions, like if you're racing a race course and you're making very precise turns. That's my opinion. That's my opinion. I crash more on the Cobra X. I mean, there's various reasons why that might be that don't necessarily pertain to latency. In all the controlled tests I know of where only latency was a variable, a difference of 10 or 15 milliseconds was very difficult to distinguish. MJ wants to know, will I ever do a cheap build anymore? Yes, MJ. Wow, MJ, very good question. Absolutely. MJ, just recently, I think it's, if I search for 200, yeah, Freestyle FPV drone, October 4th, 2022. Freestyle FPV drone for under $200.
Everything in FPV
is it even possible? So this was my last sort of cheap roundup, where I gave you a list of products you could build to try to hit the $200 price point. I got close. We weren't actually able to hit $200. It was very close. So this is the most recent thing that I did in that direction. I also did the Bardwell beginner build. Now that was only 5 months ago. 2022 Freestyle Build Kit, which is a beginner build kit. Comes in around $260. It comes under $300, which is as cheap as we could get it. So that is the last one of those I did. We'll certainly be doing more, no doubt. But for now, this is one that I recommend. And then if you want even lower price point, this is one that I recommend. Yeah. Let's see here. Could Caddx make a 4K camera for the Walksnail system to compete with the O3 Air unit? Golden FPV asks. It seems like that is something that could theoretically happen. Yeah. Nero 3D says, I have a friend sending me their old V1 DJI goggles. Other than the O3 Air unit, is there any real downside to them? Also, good idea to put an analog module on it and ditch my EV800s. The only downside of the V1 goggles is that you can't bind to the FPV drone. You can't bind to the Avata. You can't bind to the O3. You can only bind to the Caddx Vista, the DJI Air unit, and that generation of video transmitters. I think if I had EV800s, I probably would put an analog module on my DJI goggles. A good set of analog goggles is better for analog than the DJI goggles. But the EV800s are, they're okay. But the DJI is going to give you a much bigger and better looking screen. I think I would go that direction. Does it make sense to put an ND filter on the O3 Air unit? Asks Uranium. That's a tough one. I mean, it'll make your cinematic footage look better, but it'll also make your FPV view look blurry, which you may not want. This is the fundamental limitation of having your action camera and your FPV camera be the same camera. Jekyll. Fuck. Can never remember how to pronounce your name. Jekyll. Says the analog module with DJI adds some latency. Yes, it adds about 1 frame of latency, but I think probably the larger picture and better screen would offset that for me. I mean, it's tough. Would you suggest using the DJI antenna or change them to 2 separate ones on the O3? Asks FPV Trends. FPV Trends, my usual approach with DJI antennas is to use them, because if I buy separate antennas for all of my quads, let's say that's a minimum of $20 per quad, and that really adds up. And I've found that the DJI antennas have pretty good performance. On the Walksnail quads, no. You should upgrade. James Reedy asks, has anybody done a side-by-side of Ghost versus Express LRS on long range? I think Wesley did. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, Wesley Vardy did a Ghost range test. And and he has also tested Express LRS. So you can compare his results. Oh, here they are. Express LRS.
Test now on a bigger wing to see how far it really goes before fail safe. You know, I have this 0.6 kilometers on 100
Okay, there we go.
milliwatts with FLRC.
All right, I don't know about his music situations. I don't want to get a copyright strike. I'm going to mute him. So there you go. I'm sure he's gone way further than that on Express LRS. What's going on there? Why is this only 10 kilometers? Why is it only 10 kilometers? That doesn't seem right. That doesn't seem right at all. No. Here's his Express LRS range test. Thank you. Thank you. That's more like it. Express LRS 33.5 kilometers did not fail safe. His Ghost. His work happened with this result. Ghost about 27 kilometers. Express LRS at 100 milliwatts did almost the same distance at 1/3 the power. So there you go. I don't think he did 30 kilometers with 1 watt, Cool Cat. I think he did 30 kilometers on 100 milliwatts. Yeah. Excuse me. Express LRS will go way further than 10 kilometers on 100 milliwatts. That's for sure. Bags FPV, thank you for a $5 super chat. Pros and cons for dynamic power on Express LRS or Crossfire for freestyle in open areas. Bags, if you're in an open area, I don't think there should be a downside to dynamic power. The potential downside of dynamic power is that you will fly into an area where you don't have enough power, and then you will fail safe before the unit raises power to bring the signal strength back up. Or that you'll get like a glitch. Maybe you won't get a full fail safe, but you'll get a little bit of a glitch. If you're in an open area, that shouldn't happen. The signal strength should not change rapidly enough that the dynamic power algorithm, assuming it's implemented correctly, that the dynamic power algorithm can't keep up. The place where dynamic power really screws you is where the signal strength changes dramatically very quickly. So if you fly behind a building, a big concrete building, theoretically with dynamic power, it may not respond quickly enough or as quickly as you would like and get that power back up. But if you're flying in an open field, I don't see any reason not to use dynamic power. The bottom line is use dynamic power. Watch your LQ during the flight. If you see that your LQ is dropping and you don't like how low it's getting, then try using static power. That's my approach. Thank you, Roger Kirker for $5. Roger asks, my TBS Micro TX V2 is in bootloader mode, rapid flashing blue, and I can't get out of bootloader mode. What to do? Roger, I would reflash it. And if that didn't work, I would contact TBS support on the assumption that you've got some damage to the module. That's all I can recommend. Reflash it using the TBS Agent M or the TBS Web Agent, I think they call it now. The online version of TBS Agent. Yeah. The Entertaining Obsidian asks, at the settings that give you the lowest latency on the DJI O3, is it good enough to do light racing? Obsidian, that depends entirely on your standards for latency and racing. Some people race the DJI FPV drone. People race all kinds of things that fly, well, worse than a lot of people would expect a racing quad to fly. The bottom line, I mean, just if you enjoy racing it, then you race it. Are you going to be competitive? I mean, you're not going to be as competitive as you could be on a link that has higher latency and variable latency. That's a fact. However, a lot of the time, just fly what you brought and have a good time. And, you're not trying to go to nationals and win first prize. Maybe you're just trying to have fun. In which case, by all means, fly what you're going to fly. The main thing I think that you're going to run into, though, is that you won't work with the timing system. The DJI, I don't think anybody's tested the O3 as far as I know. But will it work with timing systems? We know that the V2 system, the variable output power, and the fact that the goggles transmit, and the fact that the frequencies don't quite line up, all of that means that the timing systems often miss laps when you're running DJI at a race. And so presumably that stuff is all going to be true with the O3, and you're not going to have problems with missed laps and stuff. But fly what you want to fly. And have fun. That's what I would say. And absolutely one IFPV. The other thing is if you're flying with other people, you need to make sure that you know how to avoid interfering with other people. I'm going to recommend you this video of mine. The title is DJI and Analog Can Fly Together, Stop FPV Interference. Okay? And this is a must. It's a mandatory watching for anybody who's bringing DJI to a flight line that includes analog pilots. You need to watch it. You need to understand how not to ruin everybody else's day. Huh. Oh, man, this was a long time ago. Will it interfere? Here we got a latency test. We're not sure. Oh, how much better is the range on DJI versus analog? It was a long time ago. Oh, the Golden FPV, thanks for a $5 super chat. Appreciate that donation. Bob H. asks, I have 3 flight controllers, all stopped measuring battery voltage completely. After a while, 2 of them were on the same quad. What could have caused this? I damaged the flight controller. I don't know, man. That sounds like there's a flaw in the design of that flight controller. I can't think of anything you could have done to cause this. There's just a little voltage divider on the VBAT input that brings the voltage down and sends it to a pin on the processor. Then that's used to measure the voltage coming in. That's a very simple circuit, and it does break sometimes. But if you have 3 of them that failed in the exact same way, I mean, you just plug it in, right? They're rated for up to 6S. You just plugged in a 6S battery. You weren't running it on 8S or something, right? Somehow it's been damaged. They shouldn't be damaged that way. I probably would stop buying that exact flight controller. I don't know. Could Jeremy Sarge has a good point. Did you update Betaflight and maybe they're just all miscalibrated? Like, could they just be miscalibrated? Usually the correct value, I think it's a voltage scale of 110 is correct. So maybe you've like messed up your configuration and they're all working correctly, but your calibration is off. That's my guess. I mean, maybe. Or you damaged it somehow. MPRC asks, what's up with the O3 camera showing the front posts on the JBK QAVS frame? Yeah, I also don't want posts showing. The frame needs to be updated to reflect the new camera. We're working on it. The frame will be updated. This is going to be true for a lot of frames because the camera is 20 millimeters wide and it's wider than other cameras. For the time being, though, you basically can't use the O3 with any frame that has 19 millimeter standoffs. Bob H says all of them worked for a while, then stopped spontaneously. Well, then it's got to be hardware damage, Bob. I don't know what else to tell you. That's unfortunate. It's got to be hardware damage. There's a question here from Irazvan who says, you said you're going to update your perfect freestyle build. Where's the update? Good question. I actually recorded most of that, and I haven't recorded the conclusion yet and edited it. I got distracted with this motor testing I was doing with Ciotti, and it just, fell between the cracks. I should really make sure I get that out. Thank you for the reminder. Black Jungle 308, thank you for 5 reais. On cameras, soft mounting or hard mounting, or does it depend on the mass of the quad versus the camera? I always hard mount my FPV cameras. Sometimes it can make sense to soft mount GoPros. It does. I'm not sure. The heavier the camera is, the more effective the mounting is going to be at providing damping. I have heard of people soft mounting the DJI O3 camera, which is both an FPV and an action camera, to improve its stabilization performance. I think it's less effective on small cameras, though, because they just don't have the weight to provide the damping. Pot Kaz, thank you for 14 South African Rand. Would you ever do a video about building a 3D quad? Yes. So I did a video a while back, not 3D printers, how I flew this Mobula 7 upside down, which shows how to set up 3D mode and then do a little flying upside down. I'm not super into 3D flying, so I wasn't, I never really did a lot more about it. There's nothing really special about a 3D quad, though. It's all ESCs today basically can do 3D, and any quad that you build could be flown in 3D mode if you wanted to. Marley says, my Emax Tiny Hawk Freestyle won't bind after a small crash. I got bad news for you. Anytime you crash and then something stops working, it means it broke in the crash. Uranium wants to know the best O3 frame you would recommend at the moment. The Vanny style is certainly tempting. I know Vanover's updated it for the O3. I know everybody else is sort of scrambling to update, but Vanny style is a solid frame and is made to suit the O3. There's the iFlight F5 frame, the Evoke frame. It's not. I think it's more tailored toward the Evoke bind and fly than a generic freestyle frame. It's got some limitations. You would pretty much need to build it out with like a 20 millimeter stack, for example. So I think that's pretty specific. Any estimate when the QAV-S will be updated for the O3 Air unit? Well, they're working on it now. As far as when you can actually buy the parts, I don't know. I think it's going to be a couple of weeks of refinement, just figuring out what to do with the front end. Maybe a month, I would guess. GapRC Mark V has been updated for O3. That's a good general purpose 5-inch freestyle frame that will suit the O3. There's the AOS, of course. AOS has been the AOS 5 has been updated to suit it. That's a good point. Very good point. Those are solid frames. The new Rotor Riot tank, Matthew Clark points out. That's TAC's new, not TAC. Let's Fly FPV's new frame. Thank you, Black Jungle, for 5 ray eyes. I'm doing good. How do I like my beans? I'm not a big bean eater. I like bean soup. Nice bean soup. I don't love fried beans. I guess steamed, boiled. All right, Erazvan. It's spread it out, man. You're repeating the same question too often. It's annoying. And even more annoying, you're tagging me so my name shows up in orange. Spread it out. Repeat your question about 1/2 to 1/3 as frequently. I understand sometimes I miss the question, but also sometimes I just, it's just annoying to see it 50 million times. Or just don't tag my name so I can ignore it more easily if I'm not interested in it. So. Let's see here. Potkas asks, 3D video, not 3D upside down flying. 3D video through goggles that support receiving 2 video transmitters. So Potkas, the Sky Zone goggles used to be able to do that. I'm pretty sure they don't anymore. There basically are no goggles right now that receive 2 VTXs at a time and send 1 through each eye. All the technology to do 3D, stereoscopic 3D vision, basically what it does is it splits the frame left to right, and half the frame is the left eye and half the frame is the right eye, or something like that. That technology does exist. Fat Shark goggles used to support it. Basically, nobody used it. There was like one camera out there that did stereoscopic 3D. Yeah, basically nobody does it anymore. So it's just not really a thing. Lewis asks, is your impression that the goggles 2 have better range with the O3 Air unit than the goggles V2? Lewis, that was my impression when I flew them. We really need somebody like Wesley Vardy to do a more rigorous range test. One thing to keep in mind is that I've heard some people say that the goggles 2 use H.265 and the V2 goggles use H.264. I don't know how they know that, or why they think that. But if that were true, then that could explain why the goggles 2 get better performance, even though the video transmitter is the same for both of them. Opinions about the Ghost Hybrid Ultimate. Yeah, the Ghost Hybrid Ultimate is very cool. This is I think it's 1+ watt. Hello? Can your webpage load? Okay, thank you. So it's a Ghost receiver and a video transmitter all in one. 1500 milliwatts, 1.5 watts. Why does it say US units limited to 1 watt? Well, why is it a 1500 milliwatt video transmitter? What's the deal there? Why do you advertise it as 1500 milliwatts, but you sell it? Where can I buy it and get 1500 milliwatts? Okay, anyway. What's cool about it is it integrates the video transmitter and the Ghost receiver into one. So if you're a Ghost pilot flying analog, this is super compelling. I love the integration of Ghost and the video transmitter. I have a Ghost hybrid on my racing quads, and it's amazing to be able to easily switch channels using the menu in the module. It's amazing to have your quadcopters all power up. And first of all, the video doesn't turn on until you power up the controller. So if you plug your quadcopter in first for some reason, it doesn't power up at all. And then as soon as you power up your controller, the video transmitter knows from the module what band and channel it's supposed to be on and jumps to them. So you never power up on the wrong channel. You just set the channel in your module, and as soon as you plug the quad in, it just goes to that channel. Obviously, you could set it to the wrong band and channel and get in trouble, but it's a great way of managing the system. It's super, super simple and super nice. And to have that just completely integrated is very convenient. It keeps the build simple. There's no separate receiver to wire up. I mean, there is a wire coming off of the video transmitter going to the flight controller, right? So you have to wire it up, but it keeps. If you are using the Ghost system and you're using analog, this is very, very compelling. The downside, I think, is that there are relatively few people using the Ghost system, and there are fewer people using analog day by day. So there you go. Audio Geek says, I'm doubling up the arms on an 8-inch for stiffness. Yeah, sure. I could see that. Do you ever have fogging issues on the goggles too? Asks Bent FPV. Bent, I didn't have fogging issues, but it's winter here, so that doesn't mean anything. The goggles don't have any anti-fogging fan, that's for damn sure. And DJI's manual says if you experience fogging, go inside for a little while. Oh yeah, I'll get right on that. I discovered something interesting yesterday about the O3 system. What can I... No. Is it here? No. Is it here? I'll have to find this footage, unfortunately. Oh, there we go. So, oh, let's go here. So I was doing a little bit of a test to figure out all of the different permutations of what will output to what. So as you can see here, let's mute the desktop. We don't need that. As you can see here, with the goggles 2, I can... Let me mute this. Hello, Joshua. As you can see here, with the goggles 2, you can get screen output to the DJI Fly app. And that was kind of cool. I knew that. Notice that this is got the Betaflight OSD and everything, all the OSD. The menus don't show up, interestingly, but the OSD does. Okay, fine. So then I went and got this doohickey, right? This thing has an HDMI output. There we go. So this thing has an HDMI output. It plugs into your phone. And so the nice thing about that would be that you could have HDMI output via screen mirroring. Well, guess what? It didn't work. It didn't work. Nothing I did could make it work. I don't think I tested. I don't think I tested it in this particular video. So then I went and got the goggles too. And here's the interesting part. The goggles too. I've got to fast forward a little. The goggles too did work with the DJI Fly app. And interestingly, they output a clean feed. And I know why. I'll tell you that in a second. But the goggles too also worked with this HDMI USB dongle through the DigiView app, not through the DJI Fly app. And also gave a clean feed, but for this one would allow HDMI out. So the takeaway, this is going to be in a video. The takeaway from this is that if you want HDMI out or a clean feed with the O3 Air unit, the V2 goggles are the ones you want, not the goggles 2. Black Jungle, 100% that's an HDMI output. I've used it before. So how about that? The image is not usable ping-wise. It's only for spectating. Does the O3 have the same video connector as the Vista when it plugs into the flight controller? Yes, it does. Am I going to update my Tango 2 with the CNC gimbals from Pyrodrone? No, but only because I don't really use my Tango 2 ever, except to make tutorial videos. I don't use it as a daily driver. Audio Gek, did I miss a part of your question? I'm looking, Audio Gek. I'm doubling up the arms for stiffness, but that will mean part of the load will be on the motor screws. At the moment, the arms want to flex. Your opinion, please. If you're doubling up the arms for stiffness, then you'd be better off to glue the arms together. I don't think you're going to get as much benefit as you think you will if you just screw the arms together, if they can flex like that. And I think you could introduce resonance problems. So, like, the actual best solution would be to epoxy the arms together, in my opinion, until somebody smarter than me tells me different. Otherwise, yes, when the arms flex, you will stress the motor screws, and what are you going to do? That's my opinion. Mike Glider, thank you for a $5 super chat. With the V2 DJI goggles, do you think we will get OSD with future updates if we are too far past to do root? Mike, I know that the FPV WTF guys are working on ways to root other firmwares. It's difficult, and I don't know if they have succeeded or will succeed. I think that it sure seems to me. I always get shit from people when I say things like this, but I stand by them. DJI released the O3 Air unit. It has Betaflight OSD. It feels to me like DJI's position is, if you want Betaflight OSD, buy the O3 Air unit. Enjoy. Have fun. We gave it to you. Their approach is not, I'm going to do all this work to backport this desirable feature into an old previous generation product. It doesn't mean that they never do that. And people will say, well, yeah, but this one time they did this thing that we liked. It doesn't mean that they never do that. Okay? But right now, I don't see DJI putting a bunch of development effort into making Betaflight OSD work on the Caddx Vista when they'll be like, well, just buy an O3 if you want that feature. That's a differentiation that they can use to make you buy new hardware. And that's the business that a lot of... It doesn't mean that they're like bad. It just means that like when you release an iPhone and it's got some new feature that everybody wants, they don't backport that to a previous generation. And they say, oh, well, the hardware can't handle it. And we can't blah, blah, blah. And what they really mean is, I want you to buy the new one. So. No, I don't see that happening. I would think that development on the V2 is basically finished. Except for like basic bug fixes and stuff. Torpedo Law says, do you ever have people show up on your property to fly unexpectedly? No. Please don't just randomly show up at my house. It's like, it's my house. You know. That would be. I sometimes have events at my house, but don't just randomly show up just to say hi. That'd be a little weird. Alrighty. Sub 250 grams does mean with the LiPo. Who's going to be the first to find the range limit on the new O3 system? Wesley Vardy. In my opinion, he should be the first. Warlock Prince says, I have an issue with my tiny drone. It flies to the right when the control sticks are in the middle. How do I fix that? Warlock Prince, the very first thing you should do is go to your receiver tab. Go to your receiver tab. And make sure that your channels are centered at 1500. Now, right now, this is just fail-safe. Well, you're going to need to have your controller powered up and wiggle the sticks and see that the channels move. But you need to have the channels centered at 1500. If they're not, the drone will drift. That assumes that you're in acro mode and not in angle mode. If you're in angle mode, you still need your sticks to be centered, but you could have a problem with the calibration of the accelerometer. So the other thing you may need to do, first of all, put it in acro mode. Take it out of angle mode and see if it flies straight. And if your channels are centered, then it should fly straight. Then put it into angle mode, and if it suddenly starts drifting, it means your accelerometer is not calibrated, and you fix that here in the setup tab. You hit the calibrate accelerometer button. Black Jungle 308, thank you for a $5 super chat. Is there a way to enable or disable trims depending on a switch position? That's interesting. That's a very interesting question. That's interesting. It seems like there ought to be.
I learned something today. Switch warning.
Let's find out if the answer to this question. Ooh, I got my camera set up today. See? I got my camera set up. Hold on one second. Oh, shit. Look at that. Well, it's even working straight out the box. Look at that. Didn't even have to unplug or plug in or anything. Oh, we don't want that. Hang on. There we go. That's looking good. Can you turn the trims on and off based on a switch position? So if that was going to be a, so here's, let's think this through. We have flight mode. Trims are, we can apply trims. No, we don't want to do that.
Trim center.
No. I don't think flight mode is the answer. Inputs. So on the inputs, trims on. Okay, got it. Bingo. Got it. So here's what you're going to do, Black Jungle. On your inputs, you're going to duplicate each input. Okay, so now we have 2 aileron inputs, right? Edit. The input. Please tell me I can lock an input to a switch. Shut up. Shut up. Oh, yes, right here. So for switch, we're going to set that switch to, let's say it's SD middle, okay? That's my angle mode. And for that one, trims are going to be on. And for the second one, we're going to edit, and we're going to do switch SD middle, and then I'm going to long press the jog wheel, and it's going to negate. Did you see how it says not SD middle now? That's what the exclamation point means. Okay, let's do it again. So we put SD middle as the switch, and then we long press the jog wheel, and it negates it. Okay? And for that one, we're going to have trims off. Okay? So now for our aileron input, when the switch is not in the middle position, our trims are off. When the switch is in the middle position, our trims are on. Bing, bang, bong. That's how you do it. Woo! That's good. That's good. I love, some of the most fun I have on these live streams is wacky OpenTX programming challenges. That's good. I'll make a video about that. Thank you for the suggestion. And, yeah. All right, now I have to undo all this BS that I did to my... I always need to copy my model before I do these examples. I've screwed up my own model now. Trim on. Yeah. I really should just turn trims off, though. Why would you use trims at all? Well, in angle mode, you can use trims to have the same effect as trimming the accelerometer. So like, let's say you're in the middle of a whoop race, right? And you're running heats, and your accelerometer has gotten a little whacked out from crashing. This has happened to me. And your quad is just like drifting slightly to the right. And so you're having to hold the stick to the right the whole time you're flying. Well, you just bump the trim to the left a little bit, or to the right, whatever. You just bump the trim a little bit, trim it out, and you get on with racing. And yeah, your channel's slightly uncentered, but it's fine. I've had whoop races where I intentionally trimmed pitch forward a little bit so that the quad, I didn't have to hold forward on the stick to make it fly forward. I could just focus on my turns. So, yeah. That's why you might do that. Harrison Knight If you have Edge TX, oh, I'm glad I got my overhead camera here. If you have Edge TX, and if you have Express LRS, do you have Express LRS? No, all modes one switches, all modes one channel is the same in Edge TX. Harrison, the mixes and so forth are set up the same. The screen looks different and the menus look a little different, but the basic steps of setting it up are the same. If you have a specific place you're stuck, Harrison, it's better to just email me. Now, if you're having problems with Express LRS, probably the problem you're running into is this. In Express LRS Lua script, you need the switch mode to be set to wide. Otherwise, the all modes one channel won't work. 661 FPV. Nice that you speak for everyone in all of FPV. I literally just told you an example of a time when I was at a whoop race and I used trim switches to deal with this problem. And you're like, nobody does that. Like, I literally just told you of the time when I did that. No, I didn't do it. You're saying that there's no time to bump the trim buttons, but there is time to disarm and rearm the quad. I'm not talking about like when you crash and the accelerometer is completely whacked out and the quad like wants to fly upside down. I'm just talking about little adjustments between heats. I've literally done this. So I'm not the only one who does this, I'm sure. Okay. Craig Mitchell, thank you for a $2 super chat. Fresh build, tried so much. Low throttle flutter? That's not enough information for me to dive in, Craig Mitchell. I appreciate your $2 donation. And obviously, Craig, you're welcome to email me. We can dive into it a little bit more. Probably would love to see some video of what you're experiencing. Like when you say low throttle flutter, do you mean prop wash oscillation, where you drop the throttle and the quad descends and kind of goes whoop, 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 or something? I got to figure out what low throttle flutter is before I can really start to advise you. Feel free to email me, as with anyone, not just the people who super chat me, but feel free to email me. What would be the best digital system when using Fat Shark V3 goggles? Fat Shark V3, what even is that? Dominator 3? Do they have an HDMI input, FPV Joe? If yes, then your choice is either the Walksnail or the HD0 system. And here's the thing. Both the Walksnail and the HD0 system have benefits and things that make people really love them and things that make people dislike them. And you have to figure out which of those things you care the most about. The short version is that HD0 is going to have more consistent frame timing. It's going to have smoother frames, lower latency by a lot, and consistent latency. With HD0, when the signal gets weak, you get little speckles of static, if you will, on the screen, but the data that comes in is not affected at all in terms of its timing. Okay? The timing never changes. With the Walksnail system, the signal, as you get further away and the signal gets weaker, packets get lost and retransmitted, and that means that the latency of the link goes up, and the latency of the link is not consistent. So you can have these stutters as you fly through obstacles and stuff. Little and sometimes when it's really bad, it's like literally like the screen freezes and then jumps. And other times it's almost subconscious, and many people don't think they feel it, but other people think it has an effect on your ability to fly precisely. The upside of the Walksnail system is that overall it's going to have higher resolution, more detail in the image most of the time. Eventually you get far enough away that Walksnail gets very low bitrate and blocky, and then the question is, what would HD0 look like under those same circumstances? But you got to do your research. If your goggles have HDMI input, though, either Walksnail or HD0, those are the only two that have a receiver that has an HDMI out that can work with your goggles. Farky says, when I crash my whoop hard, sometimes the accelerometer gets decalibrated and it's fixed by power cycling it. Why is that? Farky, the accelerometer is a tiny microscopic mechanical object. It has a little like arm, like down at the atomic level. Like we're talking about literally at the atomic level. It's got this little arm, and as the arm is affected by gravity and acceleration, the capacitance of a circuit changes. I don't actually even know like all how it works. But basically, because it's literally a mechanical little wiggly arm sticking out, when you whack it hard enough, it gets whacked out and it doesn't calibrate correctly. It gets messed up. Yes, thank you. This is a good picture. This is what I'm thinking of. Yeah, here, put it over here. Yeah, this is what's inside your accelerometer. A little microscopic, literally built at the atomic scale device that works like this. And so this thing can sort of get whacked out when you crash. And I know that the capacitance of the circuit changes. That's literally like all I know about this. But basically, now here's the thing that I don't understand is why does it get fixed when you power cycle it? Because like if it got whacked and like then it got like messed up somehow, it got stuck, why does power cycling fix it? I don't know. Maybe it calibrates when it powers up or something. This is it's freaking amazing, the amount, like the complexity of this technology. Thank you for sharing this photo, Black Jungle. This is I'm guessing it's an electron microscope. This is a view of the actual sensor inside the accelerometer, built down at the atomic level. Amazing. Just amazing that somebody thought to invent this. The idea that, like, inside that little chip is not just like an electric circuit, which in some abstract way, my brain goes, yeah, electric circuits, of course, they're very tiny. Like, it's just all those electrons running around doing what they do. Electrons are tiny. Of course, electric circuits are tiny. But we have actually a physical moving, a mass on a spring, you know, down at the 20 micrometers. Like, just mind-boggling. Just mind-boggling. Anyway, all MEMS devices are subject to miscalibration from external shock. I still don't know why the power cycle fixes it, though. Todd Burke, thank you for a $5 super chat. I picked up a Zorro Express LRS. I have a TX16S. Is there a way to have many drones bind to the whichever one is turned on, or will I need to rebind when switching? Todd Burke, one of my favorite features of Express LRS is that binding can be managed simply through the binding phrase. So you flash all of your receivers with the same binding phrase, and that could be any phrase just a string of characters like a Wi-Fi password. It's not like actually a password for security. The devs like to make that clear, but it's similar to a Wi-Fi password in that you just put it on them, and then any module that has the same binding phrase will also bind to them. So and I realize this is a little unique to me as a content creator. I have a lot of controllers and modules that I test and use. And the great thing is that when I get a new module or a new radio, I just flash it with my binding phrase, boom, it's instantly bound to all of my receivers. And when I get a new quadcopter, I flash it with my binding phrase, and boom, it is instantly bound to all of my modules. Could not be simpler. People say that, oh, Express LRS, why can't they just have a bind button? Yeah, they do. Some of them do. You can do traditional binding. I don't like it. I like binding phrases. Binding phrases are amazing. What about SPI? SPI receivers can also have binding phrases. You just put the binding phrase in the Betaflight command line. Good to see you, James. Glad you're here. Drone Camps RC, good to see you here, friend. The Entertaining Obsidian, thank you for a $5 super chat. I'll super chat since it's a specific to me question. Any thoughts on the iFlight Blitz E55S 4-in-1 ESC with the JBF7? That's a great choice. Any of the Blitz ESCs will work with the JBF7 with the factory plug. So that, I mean, that's a fine ESC. It's pin compatible, which is nice. Some people, I mean, is the Blitz like a great ESC? It's hard to tell. They make a lot of them. iFlight in general makes good quality stuff. Oops, wrong screen. There's always somebody out there who's like, I'm never buying an iFlight ESC ever again because they had a bad experience. And I can't speak to that. I think with any product, there's somebody out there who has had a bad experience and hates it. I've got the Blitz ESCs. I haven't had a good experience with them. I think in general, iFlight tends to make good stuff. So that's what I would go with. Just because it's pin compatible and I'm lazy. I mean, if I had 3 dead ESCs in a row from the same manufacturer, I also wouldn't buy them anymore. You know, I'm not saying that didn't happen to somebody with iFlight ESCs. Just saying it hasn't happened to me. The SuccessX ESCs also work fine. I just don't think they're made anymore. Mupshot, you have a good question. Mupshot, Mupshot is looking for a camera for a tiny whoop, and so this is my website, fpvknowitall.com, and this is the tiny whoop page on my website, which is where we have product recommendations for parts in the tiny whoop category. And the way we approached this page is first we suggest some bind and flies you may want to get, and then we have some builds. And Aaron Ciotti is the guy who basically built this whole page out because he's really an expert on whoops, and I felt like it was better to get somebody who really lives and breathes this stuff in a way that I don't. He said the best thing to do is just buy a Mobula 6 and then, you know, put a couple upgrades on it. Or the best thing to do is to buy an Acroby and put some upgrades on it. And his thinking is that the default camera that comes with these guys is fine. And so I realized we never suggested like a spare camera. Here's a 75mm. We never suggested like a spare camera because basically all the builds that we got come with the camera. So Joseph Tahari, I agree with you that the Ant Lite or the Ant are good cameras for a whoop. One of the better ones. As far as video transmitter, on a tiny whoop, you 100% want the video transmitter integrated into the flight controller. Like, we don't have a separate video transmitter recommendation here because, like, all of the flight controllers that we recommend, we really should have separate parts on here, though, shouldn't we? Just for spares and shit. Yeah, I think we should. Interesting. I got to think about that. All of the flight controllers we recommend have built-in video transmitters, and I would be hard pressed to recommend you a standalone video transmitter Like the Happy Model Diamond VTX could work. It's going to add a lot of weight, though, compared to having it integrated. What's that Goku for milliwatt VTX? What's the Goku one? The X625. This Flywoo Goku X625 probably could be made to work. It's pretty small and pretty light. FPV Gizmo, always open to suggestions for things that need to be added. If you think there's stuff that's missing on that page, by all means, send it in. Send it in. Remember that the goal of the page is the goal of the page is to take somebody who doesn't know what to get and to help them make a good decision, not to be an exhaustive document of all of the stuff that people are doing in the space. I know that Ciati is working on a race build, a high-quality race build, which hasn't been added yet. That's something people pointed out was missing. But if there's other stuff you think needs to be added, by all means, send it in. You know what my email address is. Always glad to have tips from people who think, yeah, for sure. Ghost Branch wants to know, when using the O3 air unit with the V2 goggles, it's limited to 810p. Correct. What if it's tethered to a smart controller? 810p. I mean, I don't see how it could. Smart controller plugs in with USB. I don't think it's doing any change in the resolution. I don't know for sure, Ghost Branch. I would guess it's 810p, but then if it's outputting HDMI, it can't feed HDMI 810p. That's just not a resolution. That's a good point, Ghost Branch. Maybe the smart controller has a native resolution of 1080, for example, and it's doing a resolution up-res. That's a good question, Ghost Branch. I think that Ghost Branch, that it can't output 810p from the HDMI because there's a lot of display devices that just wouldn't know what to do with an 810 resolution. So I would strongly expect that the smart controller outputs either 720 or 1080. I think you're right there. I don't know, though, because I don't have a smart controller anymore because I sold it after the FPV Out project became everything I needed. One IFPV, I don't know where you would get ultrafine silicon wires smaller than 30 gauge. I guess you could do. Here's what I would suggest. I mean, this is not the great solution. If you buy the Race Day Quads silicon cable set, it comes with a bunch of tiny cables and they're pinned out. You could just cut the pins off and use them as cables. Like, I guess that's what I would do. Yeah, other people are making that same. We thought the same direction. Other people making that same suggestion. Beeg wants to know, Crossfire RF profile, 150 hertz or dynamic? Locked. Whatever you do with Betaflight 4.3, the way that they've updated the feed forward and the smoothing, Betaflight 4.3 really wants you to have a fixed frame rate. So either lock it at 50 or lock it at 150. If you choose to use dynamic, know that some of the time your RC command won't be as perfect as it could be. It's not the end of the world. I would lock at 150 or lock at 50, though, depending on whether I was doing proximity stuff or whether I was doing longer range stuff. Andy Plater, thank you for a $2 Canadian super chat. I'm speccing out a 250 gram 3-inch quad. Any tips? Yes. Andy Plater, thank you for the opportunity. No, I didn't want to search. Oh, well, it's going to work. I've got a page on my website, Andy, with parts recommendations for Sub-250. Here are all of my product recommendations for the Sub-250. We got some bind and flies, and we got some frames, and we got some motors and so forth. Flight controllers, etc. So this is this is where I would refer you. And if you have any questions, of course, you're welcome to email. FPV Joe, thank you for a $2 super chat. I just realized it's 3 minutes to the top of the hour. We are about to finish up the stream. Is Aaron Ciotti here? Is he streaming today? Oh, I need to let you guys know that there will not be a stream next weekend. I have a professional engagement that is going to take me out of town. And Ciotti canceled today. Okay, well, phooey. I have a professional engagement next weekend that will take me out of town, so there will not be, you will not see one on the schedule, and that's because there isn't one, not because I forgot to schedule it. So just a heads up about that. I'll remind you again as it gets closer. But other than that, that is going to do it for today's stream. Thank you guys so much for coming out. And yeah. Good stream, guys. Too much DJI stuff? I saw somebody saying, I wish there was a no DJI stream. We talk about what people are interested in. Happy flying, you guys. Have a great afternoon or evening. I'll see you tomorrow at Monday at 8 p.m. Tomorrow I will be streaming, so I'll see you there.